have to start with a confession. I used to really hate driving this car. I could never imagine why people love this car so much. And I used to ask everyone who had one how they could tahan driving this car daily. But the truth is, I finally get it and I now really love it. This is the 2011 ANH20, so it's one generation behind the latest Alphard and Vellfires, but it's actually still pretty modern. The car belongs to a family member who's had it since 2013, and it's only at about 40,000 kilometers at the moment. I've been looking after it and driving it daily for the past couple of months, so I thought I'd finally do a review on it and admit how wrong I was. In all honesty though, I never had a need for a 7-seater MPV, and that's probably the reason why I could not appreciate it in the past. Whenever I drove it, I was comparing it to what I was driving at the time, an E90 M3, Mark 6 GTI or Audi S4, so of course it felt totally different. However, I'm now in a season where I really need a car that's big enough for my kids as well as my parents, and I was actually looking at other 7-seater SUVs like the CX-8, Santa Fe and CX-9 before this. The 7-seater SUVs always have the same problem though, with access to the third row being the biggest issue, unless you went for the mid-spec CX-8. So let's start with the power and how the car drives. It has the 2AZ-FE, a 2.4 engine commonly found in other Toyotas, paired with a CVT gearbox. As boring as that sounds, it's actually really pleasant to drive. Just have the right expectations, and by that I mean just drive it slow and relaxed, and it's great. There's enough power down low, and while it struggles in the mid-range just like every other NA Japanese car, it's got enough power to overtake when you need to, as long as you plan slightly ahead. I hear the 2.5 in the newer generation Alphard and Vellfires is better, but this is surprisingly sufficient for what it is. The car does feel quite tall and there is body roll, but you get used to it quite quickly and you will then start to enjoy sitting above everyone else. The ride is nice and comfortable, perhaps not S-Class levels of comfort, but it soaks up bumps really nicely as you would expect from its size. It's also fine when going around corners, but the biggest thing I had to get used to was the braking. The brakes do not really inspire confidence, but once you get used to it, it's fine and again, does the job. With that said, all of these things combined makes the car a really pleasant, relaxing drive. I can't explain it, but I just enjoy driving slowly around in it, and I found myself taking the car out over the F30 quite often, even when I'm by myself. How about the looks? I actually really like how it looks from the front, with the huge grille, even with all that chrome that just seems to work with this car. But the rear does look like it's starting to age a bit, which is understandable of course. The newer Vellfires and Alphards are pretty over the top too in terms of looks, but I'm actually starting to love it as well. The side profile is a totally minivan, but it is what it is, so just appreciate it for what it is. The car also had a full detail and coating done by Limitless Motorsports, so it actually looks pretty good, especially in this pearl white color. The interior is pretty decent too. Again, this is the previous generation, so the newer ANH20 has a much better dashboard design, but it's fine though admittedly slightly dated. This model has the darker wood trims and the black interior, which helps. I actually really like how the Optitron kind of meter cluster looks. It's nice and legible and I think still pretty decent by today's standards. The center console area is starting to show some wear, including the dashboard having a really weird sticky texture when it sits under the sun, which I understand is a common ANH20 problem and maybe I'll sort it out one day. I also like the black Alcantara type seats. It's so nice and I think I much prefer it to leather. Another thing I like is the ambient room lights, though it unfortunately can't be turned on automatically each time. The foot-operated handbrake, like in all Mercedes-Benzes, is pretty weird at first, but I kind of enjoy using it these days. As it's a Toyota, you can expect it to be really reliable, and I can't think of anything other than the usual wear and tear stuff that needed to be done. We replaced the battery for about 300 ringgit. Usual service costs about 3 to 400 ringgit, and the CVT fluid service about 300 ringgit as well. This car does have the infamous steering rack issue, which I'll be getting fixed next, so subscribe if you are interested, as I'll be doing a video on that once it's sorted. I believe there are other common aircon related issues and perhaps suspension components that I can expect will need changing at some point, but it's pretty solid otherwise. Safety wise, the car does have curtain airbags that go all the way to the third row, which you'll be surprised is not always the case on every car with a third row. The best thing about the car is of course how practical it is. It has a mind-blowing amount of space that makes even tapawing food pretty amusing because you have so many options on where to actually put your stuff. The rear seat hooks are great too. My two boys absolutely love the car as there is so much space, and of course having that center screen is something they enjoy as well. The two pilot seats with the center aisle makes it so convenient to get to the back, and the power doors are actually really useful, especially with kids and older folks. The older folks will definitely appreciate the higher ride height as they don't have to fall into the seats like in sports sedans and then have to struggle to lift themselves out. If you've never had an MPV, you really need to experience one to be blown away by how convenient it is. The boot is huge and can be expanded by folding the seats when needed, but it's pretty annoying that the auto boot doesn't work when you try to open it manually from the back, though I understand that it's a safety feature. It's got keyless entry and auto headlights and wipers, so all of the modern convenience features you would expect these days, despite being a 10-year-old car. So in conclusion, I now get why this car is so incredibly popular, especially here in Malaysia. It's practical, reliable and cheap to maintain, and pretty comfortable to go around in. It's also relatively cheap to purchase, and you can find a used one like this for way below 100,000 ringgit. There are also a ton of recon cars available for the latest ANH20 in different specs depending on what you are looking for, including the lower spec 8-seaters or the luxurious executive lounge models. It's also generally viewed as a pretty luxurious car if that matters to you, seeing as how every family or politician, no matter how rich, seems to have one in their garage. It makes a great daily driver to pair out with a more raw, selfish weekend car. So if you're after a 7-seater or a big family car, do take a long hard look at an Alphard or Vellfire. I know the SUVs are a lot more appealing, and there are definitely reasons as to why you would buy an SUV over an MPV, but you just might be surprised by how much you like an Alphard. I know I certainly was. So thanks for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys in the next one.